I'm crashing your party.
All right.
We are on the adult faith formation team. Is so thankful that Chris and Al have taken on teaching this class and others throughout this year, that we just have a little something of thank you that we wanted to hand them today and tell them both how much we appreciate all of what you guys have done, because this is a great class, great following, and you guys have been a big part of everything you do with the adult faith formation in this congregation. So thank you.
You'll take the one for Al.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay, so the last one we're talking about today is the Great De-Churching, which is what's going on today. Today. So in other words, we've gone back and looked at all of church history and picked out the 8 most significant turning points, and you have the privilege of living in one of those significant turning points. Lucky you. Okay, so just to get the party started here, Americans who attend a worship service once per week in person. In 1959, 69%.
Wow.
All right? In 2007, it was down to 40%.
Wow.
And in 2024, which is the latest statistics we have, it was down to 25%. Anyone notice a trend? Are we declining? Or are we reverting to the American norm? Because in 1900, it was only approximately 36%. And at the time of the Civil War, it was approximately 16% were going to church. So I share this with you, and knowing that this particularly is an estimate, because no one was really counting, and but that's the estimate from scholars. Are we in a irreversible decline, as some would say? Or are we reverting to the norm? Is this a bell curve sort of thing, and it goes up and down and up and down? We don't know, because we're in the moment. But I do want to point out that for American Christians, 1959 was the height of weekly church attendance. It was a lot less before, and it's a lot less after. Okay? So just to get some perspective on this, all right? But we've got a new thing going on. It's called tracking our cell phone location. So the Booth School of Business at the University of Chicago has started tracking us, all sorts of things that we do. They know where you're at. And according to them, in 2023, only 14% went to church as opposed to 25%. So who knows? Maybe not everyone takes their cell phone with them to church. There could be all, but the point is, I want you to know, they know so much about where you are and what you're doing that they even know your church-going habits, all right? And accordingly, it seems to be a lot less than what people tell surveys, Oh yeah, I was at church on Sunday. Well, let's look at your cell phone, So that's interesting that we've got a new way of kind of looking at what people's behavior. And one thing about taking surveys that we all know is that what people say they do is not always what they actually do. And for many reasons, not necessarily that people are lying about it. People often, as they look back on their activities, over and underestimate what they have done. But that is not an encouraging number there.
But think about the huge churches that are, anyway,
Yeah.
starting. That has nothing to do with it.
We're going to get to that. Mega churches and the phenomena. But worship attendance, is across denominations. That's all, and that's not just Christian. That is all faiths and everything. Boom. All right, but we also have a new thing called online. And according to the recent data, during the height of the pandemic, 11% of people were worshiping online. That number last year was down to about 5%. But that's still hundreds of thousands of people who are worshiping online. So, and we offer that right here at this church. Most churches are offering some sort of online worship experience these days, and hundreds of thousands of people are choosing that. All right. So, where does all this come from? There's a lot of resources for a lot of different things. Most of the data points for this lesson have come from Pew Research Center. They do an annual U.S. religious landscape study that is considered the gold standard for this sort of thing. Barna Research Group, they take a little different tack. Pew Research is like the general population, what everybody's thinking. Barna focuses on Christian churches more so than the Pew. So for general, what percent of the population goes to church? That sort of thing comes from Pew. What's happening in the churches comes from Barna. Okay, they all have their different tack. There's also the Public Religion Research Institute. It's a newer entity. It's only been around for about 20, 25 years, but they also take more of the Pew Research. They want to know what the general public is doing religiously. And then, of course, you know about Gallup. And Gallup has been around a long, long time. And so you say, well, how do we know what church attendance was like, 100 years ago? Gallup has been, and their methods have changed and but Gallup has been around for a long time. So for historical data, that's kind of where we go to Gallup. Okay. There are also denominational websites that have statistics. Like I said, I got the stuff about where your cell phone says you've been from the Booth School of Business, University of Chicago. So there's a lot of other ancillary, but these are like the four big research groups that tell us what's going on in religious life in the United States. All right, so let's dig into this. Last year, the United States population was about 347 million. Of those, 38 million identified, now this is by survey, they identified as mainline Protestant for 11% of the general population. Evangelicals were just about 80 million for 23%. Those who identified as attending historically black churches, 17 million. Roman Catholic, 69 million for 20%. And then Mormons, 2%, Orthodox, 1%, Jewish, 2.4%, Hindu, 1%, Buddhist, 1%, Muslim, 1.4%, other, which could be Wiccan, they could be Native American religious practices, they could be Taoist, there's all sorts of others, but all those combined are 4.2%. And then, and this is the largest growing segment today, the atheist, agnostic, and nothing in particular is 29% of the population. The largest group identify as atheist, agnostic, nothing in particular. Yeah, Chris?
Now, what do they do with mainline Protestants who are evangelicals? Or are they treating that just as you're not?
This is done by survey, so it's how people responding identify themselves. So they don't go through and try and identify for, like, what do you do with an evangelical Roman Catholic? What do you do? Well, it's people got to choose and they sorted themselves. Okay, so that's why I said this is all done by survey, what people say about themselves. Not necessarily 100% accurate, because what people say about themselves isn't always exactly, and we'll get into some of this more later, but I wanted you to see as a percent of the general population how big this is, evangelicals, Roman Catholics, and then you've got the mainline Protestant, which most Presbyterians would probably say that, and then the historically black. Have any idea that there were so many Hindu, Buddhists, and Muslims? Yeah. Yeah, more every day. All right, break it down a little more. In-person worship attendance. All right, now once again, this is a survey, so it's what people identify. For all adults, 33% say they've been in church at least once this month. 25% say they go weekly. And that's a significant number. That correlates to that first screen we saw, that we're at 25%. Now, less than monthly is 67%, okay? So I go, maybe not once a month, but I've been few times per year. Well, so this is less than monthly, but more than a few times a year, okay? And then seldom or never, all adults say 49. So in other words, half of Americans are out, which is a much larger number than on the previous screen when we saw the agnostic, atheist, and which was 29%, right? So there's a lot of people who don't identify as an atheist, agnostic, or nothing in particular, but yet they're not in church, okay? So the number of atheists, agnostic, nothing in particular is probably higher than what people identified on that. Now, of all the religiously affiliated, all faith traditions, attendance is 35%, monthly 45%, less than monthly 54%, a few times 21%, seldom or never are 32%. For Christians, all Christians, 48% say they go monthly. You believe that? Yeah. 37% weekly, 51% less than monthly, 21% and 30% never. Other religions, 23%, 15%, 76%, 22% and 54%, and unaffiliated, 96%. 96% of unaffiliated people say they went to church less than monthly as compared to a few times a year. So you've got, besides a large group of people, agnostic, atheist, you've got a whole bunch of people unaffiliated with anything, and yet they're going to church occasionally. Could be a granddaughter's baptism or a bar mitzvah or whatever. But the other number here that pops out, of course, is other religions, 76%. Christianity is one of the few faith traditions that emphasizes weekly worship attendance. There are a lot of faiths that you're expected to go on whatever that tradition's high holy days are. For instance, Buddhists have about 4 celebrations a year, and weekly attendance, but you're expected to be there at one of those big celebrations. And so part of that has to do with the different faith traditions, and what Muslims are very big into weekly attendance. But not all faith traditions are. And so that probably is why this is, well, it's less than once a month, but it's more than just a couple times. That make sense? So that's the different faith tradition practices. But this kind of helps us see, weekly, even monthly, but weekly, kind of weak numbers. Most people are not going to any kind of religious service on a weekly basis. Now, really break it down by monthly, weekly, So for Protestants, and here we get into kind of, the gray areas of, well, this is a survey. So, but look at under Protestants, they divide evangelical, mainline, historically black, and evangelicals are in church more often than the mainline, which is the lowest, or the historically black. Roman Catholics are doing better than the mainline, historically black. Orthodox are pretty weak. Mormons are very high. And there's probably a lot of reasons for that. Then other religions, 15, 39, 6, 18, unaffiliated. And then the seldom, never, I think all makes sense. But one thing I want to point out is on the weekly participation of the Christian groups, and they considered Mormon as part of the Christian groups, the Orthodox and the mainline are by far the lowest.
Pretty weak on Jewish, I suppose.
Well, once again, a lot of Jews don't go to a temple every Sabbath, but they have high holy days that they all show up for. I know this is a lot of data points, but we've got a lot of material to cover. Mainline Protestant churches as a part of the general population, the change from 2007 to 24. Mainline has gone from 18 to only 11% of the general population. Evangelical has had a very slight decrease, 26 to 23, but look at non-denom. Boom. Now we're going to explore what that means in a moment. But look at the growth, right? Historically black, slight decline. Roman Catholic, a little bit of decline. Orthodox is about the same. And Mormons, about the same, little decline. The largest decline, mainline Protestant. The largest increased, non-denominational.
Well, you may have covered this before, but what denomination would be an evangelical then? If it's not
An evangelical church, some of those denominations would probably be the Southern Baptist Church.
not considered a mainline church?
Southern Baptists, it depends on who you ask. Most Southern Baptists differentiate themselves from the mainline church. Scholars do not. They include them. But most Southern Baptists would say they're evangelical. We're going to get into some of this. I would say a whole lot of people who go to non-denoms would consider themselves evangelical. So anyways, there have been a lot of studies on why such a big decline, and there's many reasons for that. But from World War I up to 1959, guess where the greatest increase in church attendance was? Mainline Protestants. So it's like everybody join, first in, first out kind of thing, you know? We had the biggest increase, and now we're having the biggest losses. Let's look at megachurch attendance. And according to most researchers, they define megachurch as any church with over 2,000 weekly attendees. Okay, not members, but attendees, all right? So let's look at megachurches. Approximately half of American churchgoers attend the largest 10% of churches, despite denomination. That includes Roman Catholic, Protestant, Orthodox, and Mormon, all right? Half of the people are going to 10% of our churches. Okay? That right there is the rise of the megachurch. 65% of megachurches consider themselves to be evangelical. 40% of megachurches consider themselves to be non-denominational. Okay? Look at that. Only 65% of megachurches identify as evangelical, and only 40% are non-denom. Okay, we usually, because of what's happened here in Austin, and I would say in Texas, where we have all these giant non-denoms, we think they're all giant evangelical non-denoms. It's like, no, they're not. There's a bunch of them, especially right here in our context, but only 40% are non-denom. 8 to 9% of Protestant churchgoers attend a church of over 1,000. And that is approximately, there's 1,875 Protestant congregations whose worship attendance is over 1,000.
What's ours?
Like five to 600.
What's that?
Well, as we'll see, it's actually pretty big for Presbyterians, but 46% of churchgoers attend a church with less than 100 attendees. All right? So, if you're saying that, like 50% of Americans are going to these giant churches, 46% are going to tiny churches. There aren't many churches in the middle. We are in the middle. And there's a lot of reasons for that. The middle-sized churches get squeezed because people have expectations that you will deliver the kind of religious services and programming that the mega churches offer without the resources of the mega churches. And these churches down here are really built around family systems. They usually have 2, 3, maybe a half dozen families who have been part of that church for generations. And they are the ones who support the church financially. They're the ones who cut the lawn. These churches don't die. I mean, they just keep going on. Yeah?
What about those who emphasize speaking in tongues?
That would be Pentecostal.
Yes.
Yes. And that's not, we don't have statistics for the Pentecostal, and I don't know why. I had that question too. It's like, through Barna and all these, like, no one identifies Pentecostal as a specific. I would think most Pentecostals would fall in the evangelical camp, but it's very fascinating to me that the big research people don't identify that. And that was a curiosity to me as well. Yeah.
So, excuse me. So you're making a point of mega churches come, go, rise, fall. And it says 46% attend a church with less than 100 attendees. Isn't that just mostly because they're rural?
Much of that is rural, but not all. I mean, we've got a lot of churches like this right here in Austin. There are a ton of churches with less than 100 people in worship right here in Austin. And they are evangelical, mainline, black. I mean, there's a ton of black and I would say Hispanic churches that are of this size. The Presbytery, I think it's in Mission Presbytery, it's something like 65% of our churches are this size in this presbytery. So there's a bunch of, Dripping Springs would fall, I don't know, they might be over 100.
They're growing pretty
Yeah, I know, but I don't know if they're probably over 100. But anyways.
You got Austin, San Antonio, and then everything else is a small.
Right, but what I'm saying, even in the metropolitan areas, you got small churches. Yeah. So it's not just rural, absolutely rural, but it's not just rural areas. And then the median, in other words, half are above and half are below, worship attendance for a Protestant congregation is 60 to 65 in attendance. So there are half of our Protestant churches with less than 60 to 65, half with over. Because there's a ton of these churches, there's only a few, but people are going, more people go to these churches, but there are more of these churches. Isn't that fascinating? All right, now let's look at Presbyterian churches. You're not going to look at them all. There are like 13 Presbyterian denominations in the United States. We're not going to get into them all. But our denomination, PCUSA, has 8,432 this is as of last year, including 3 mega churches. Peachtree in Atlanta, Fourth in Chicago, and Christ in Minneapolis are the 3 Presbyterian Church USAs with over 2,000 in worship. PCA, Presbyterian Church of America, has 1,964 congregations, and 4 are mega churches. The Evangelical Presbyterian Church has 626 congregations, and 2 are mega churches. All right, so all the, you think, well, mega churches are all these non-denoms. Well, no, look, there are some, not a lot, but there are some mega churches that are even Presbyterian.
Al, what's the difference between PCA and EPC? I mean, I get the initials, but what does that characterize as?
I know, we like to lump all heresies together, but that's not the way, no. And Chris, jump in here. PCA left us in the, I think, 70s over the ordination of women, and Evangelical Presbyterian Church left in the 90s over the ownership of property.
Where did Cumberland fit?
Oh, now Cumberland is, first of all, a very small Presbyterian denomination. The Cumberlands have always been separate. When the Scotch-Irish immigrants came to the colonies, they were Scotch-Irish, that heritage. The French Huguenot Protestants were Presbyterians, and they came into the Carolinas, and they formed Presbyterian churches in the Carolinas, and they got into Tennessee and Kentucky, which is where the Cumberland comes from. So our denomination, their have historical migration differences. Of the denominations of Presbyterian, we are probably the closest in theology, worship, and everything to the Cumberlands. We share worship resources, educational resources, because our only real difference is they came from France.
But I having a family full of Presbyterians above me. So women, property, that was 2 separations. What about diversity? Isn't there a third one, or did that just get broken up between?
Well, that's why they left. I'm going to be honest with you, Chris. If you want to fill in a little more here, or
Just on the women ordination, it's interesting because our this book of order has what I would call like affirmative action. You know, if you're searching for a pastor, make sure you got.
you have to consider women and minorities.
The EPA will not consider women, and the EPC has a great statement that says each church can decide
Do their own
what they
thing.
want to do. Yeah, we're not going to
Yeah.
require it, and we're not going to prohibit it.
Yeah. Okay. But the main thing I want you to see.
The thing I think was kind of the emphasis where we got to do it, we got to make a decision.
Yeah.
As
Yeah.
opposed to what.
Right. So in our denomination, we own this land in trust on behalf of the presbytery and denomination. So we cannot sell this land without presbytery approval. These churches didn't like that. They wanted to be able to buy, sell land however they wanted to without the presbytery being involved.
Now, and when a 10A issue hit, did a lot of our churches go over to EPC?
Our churches went all over the place. Some went PCA, some went EPC, some went independent, some went Orthodox. I mean, they went all over the place. But ECO wasn't around back then. ECO kind of came out of that. Eventually, we lost churches to ECO. Yeah.
What is ECO?
Evangelical Covenant of Presbyterian, Evangelical Covenant Order, Ecological Crisis. I'm not sure. It's something they made up, and it's like it's not an acronym. It's not. It's just good gas mileage. I don't know. I thought it was Covenant Order of Presbyterian. Evangelical Covenant Order of Presbyterians. Okay. All right. Is there any good news? Yes. When they asked, do you believe in God? In 1960, 92% said yes, and in 2024, 83% yes. Whole lot of people who still say they believe in God, they're just, this is all adult Americans. They're just not going to church.
I had 71% that would say they believe in something, because 29 didn't believe in anything. So
Right.
this one says 83.
Yes.
So, I mean, I've always viewed that as a positive. It's
Yes.
a reflection of the age of people today. This is a little different.
Yeah.
83 is even more optimistic
Yeah.
than 71.
Yeah. Now, we don't get into what God or what that God is. Yeah. All right, current worship attendance by generation. I'm going to put all these up there. And the main thing I want you to get is the younger generation of Gen Z, they are the highest in worship attendance. 10 years ago, they were the lowest. So Gen Z has changed their mind on religious affiliation in the last 10 years. To me, that's a good sign. To me, that also says churches ought to be paying more attention to the needs, desires, experiences of the younger church attenders, right? All right, we got a long way to go. Why have people left? According to survey, change in life circumstances. We got married, we moved, we died. Life changed, all right? Competing family priorities. You know, our kids got a soccer game on Saturday. You know, I like to go fishing. Change in personal beliefs. You know, I don't buy into that anymore. Preference for self-directed spirituality. You know, it's so much easier when you don't have to deal with everyone else around you, right? Just do your own thing. Change in pastor or this is number one reason people are taking off church rolls, why they leave, is they died. Across the board, they die. That's number one reason why people leave church. Number two is a change in pastor or church programming. People hate change. Church scandals and clergy misconduct. Lack of personal friendships. Make a friend. Be nice to the people next to you. Offended by a church. I can't tell you how many people leave church because somebody said something they didn't like. They're offended, and so they're out the door. Ugh. Disagreement with perceived political bias. This is true for mainline churches and evangelical churches. Another reason people leave church, because the church has a negative view of the LGBTQ community, and because the church has a positive view of the LGBTQ community. This is the big lightning rod that we're currently experiencing. Whichever way you go, people don't like it, they get offended, and they're out.
They need an excuse.
Lack of leadership roles available to women, and this is a growing issue in non-denoms and evangelicals. All these women who have these great education, professional jobs, they're starting to question their church leadership. Why can't I be an elder? Why can't I usher? A lot of these churches don't even have women ushering. And this is becoming a big deal. And theological disagreement with the pastor, right? It's like you're never going to find a pastor that you totally agree with. Now, you have to decide where that line is, but you're never going to agree with everything with the pastor, no matter who the pastor is, which is why people go to the preference for self-directed spirituality. So that's according when they ask people, why'd you leave? Now, what's really going on? This is what research and sociologists are telling us. People are leaving because there's a demand for instant gratification, all right? Remember when we hit the highlight of church attendance in '59? Guess what happened in the late 50s, early 60s? Instant gratification. Get yourself a credit card. The church motto had always been, be patient, work, pray. You know, we're taking the long view of things, salvation history, right? Suddenly, our whole culture changed to get it now. Why wait? Instant gratification. And I contend the credit card gave people license to begin to enter into this era of instant gratification. The demise of Sunday blue laws starting in Washington State in 1966. You couldn't work unless you were essential, like pharmacists or hospitals, things like this. Now, boom. I mean, everybody's open for business. Everybody's working except Chick-fil-A, right? But it's not just you couldn't buy alcohol on Sunday morning. You know, you had to buy all your alcohol before midnight on Saturday, right? But also Sunday morning soccer leagues, you know, football practices. Everything is happening on Sunday morning because nothing else going on, right? Well, emphasis on personal achievement versus teamwork. It's all about be all that you can be. And people see less relevance with going to churches where it's more about us together. I think this also gives rise to the evangelical theology of it's about getting saved and helping others get saved. Take care of you and your family, right? As more of a mainline traditional theology, which is we're all in this together as the people of God, the kingdom of God, right? Individualism versus teamwork has led to a demise in church attendance. Religion removed from the list of polite conversation topics. You know, I grew up in the 60s. Two things you don't talk about, right? Politics and religion, right? Decreasing social stigma for not attending. There was a time in the 50s, if you stayed home, you kept the shades closed. You didn't want your neighbors to know that you were skipping church, right? Now, nobody cares. Television, radio, internet, social media, religious programming, okay? This is the good and the bad, right? On the one hand, it's great that we can access all this. On the other hand, people are doing this instead of going to church. Churches adopting business practices over spiritual disciplines. This was huge. So after World War II, what I refer to as the builder-bomber generation, and sometimes they're called the greatest generation. But these are the people who won World War II, and they built all these Fortune 500 companies, right? They were organizers. They built great things in the world, right? Well, they got onto their church sessions and elders, and guess what? We're going to follow business practices, best practices for business. And churches started hiring business administrators. And they developed board of trustees that were interested in the financial services for the congregation. I'm not saying any of that's wrong, but I think we went too far the other way. And it's like, well, where is the role of prayer and the Holy Spirit and these sorts of things? Too many churches have gotten into the business of being church. And you look at some of these churches that actually have businesses, you know, Joel Osteen. Tension created by the culture wars over diverse lifestyles. People don't like conflict. They don't. And so the culture wars is keeping people away from church on both the right and the left. Highly publicized church scandals, and we don't have enough time to go through all of them. There have been so many. And widespread erosion of trust in all public institutions, right? People don't trust the government. People don't trust their local board of education. People don't trust the church. There's just this widespread distrust of institutions, and for some good reasons. But this is what researchers, beyond just giving a survey, when they take the time to have conversations with people, and they're taking notes and putting this together, this is what the researchers are saying are the larger society issues. You notice on the survey, it's more what's happening to you in your life. This is what's happening in our culture that is driving people away. What lies ahead? This is according to me, and I say that because no one knows. But I got a good idea. Fewer houses of worship of all faith traditions. Churches are closing at a rapid rate, and not just Protestant churches. Churches are closing. Fewer opportunities to be blessed by the gospel of Jesus Christ. We gather together because our lives have been blessed and transformed by the gospel of Jesus Christ. And a big part of our mission is to share that blessing with the world, right? Fewer houses of worship, fewer people organizing for mission, less opportunity to bless the world. And I see that as a sad thing. More online and electronic resources for spiritual growth. I think that's good. I'm not opposed to that. I don't think it takes the place of actual in-person encounters, but I think that's a good thing. Less singing, art, theological relation, and less bad coffee. I mean, think about this. Where do most people sing, if ever? It's at church. We don't do a lot of public singing. And if you want to know the benefits of singing, just Google cognitive health and singing. It's amazing what singing does for the wiring of your brain. And there's going to be a whole lot less of that in the future. So a lot more crazy people. Increased isolation, depression, and self-absorption, right? For many people, church is the center of their social interactions. I will say especially for the elderly and disabled. Y'all know why I'm so big on holding hands in worship. Because there's one woman who lived in a subsidized senior center across the street from the church I served in North Carolina. She just, every Sunday, she would just hug me and hang on. And we had a conversation. She said, I so love it when you ask us to hold hands. It's the only time in the week a human being touches me. She felt so lonely and isolated. She loved to come to church just to hold hands and to hug. And there's a whole lot of people who are going to miss out on that. I think there's going to be longer wait times for your favorite Sunday brunch because they're not going to church. Right? Loss of a sense of belonging to something significant. People crave to be a part of something greater than themselves. All right? Why do young men and women join the Marines when it's terrible? The Marines, you have to work harder than anybody else. You get the worst assignments. If there's a war, you're the first in. The casualty rates among the Marines are... Why would anybody join the Marines? I'll tell you why. Because it is a significant organization that does amazing things. And people want to be a part of something significant, greater than themselves, even if that means a threat to their own personal safety. Think about that. People have a craving, and the church is something that's greater than any one of us. Well, people are going to lose that. Lack of spiritual and ethical accountability. If we're all just doing our own thing, who's going to call you on your personal crap? Right? increase in misappropriation of religious teachings and traditions. There's already enough heresy in the world, you know? It's only going to get worse. Decrease in clergy sexual abuse and church financial fraud. Fewer churches, right? Lack of spiritual support during times of hardship. We see this all the time with funerals. And Stacy and I often comment to ourselves, how do people without a church home survive, manage, get through the loss of a spouse, the loss of a child? Where's your support community come from if you're not a part of a church fellowship? This to me, and I'm going to, shout out to our deacons, because in this church, they do most of this work. And to me, this is where the church shines in times of hardship. It's when life is good and the flowers are blooming and the birds are singing, church is optional. Right here, wow. How do you get through? Shout out to the deacons. Decrease in overall charitable giving. Almost every church emphasizes generosity and sharing our resources. And we support people and organizations who do the same thing. That's going away. Now, not that there aren't secular organizations, but there's not as many, and they don't have as many people contributing to them. And that goes along with a decrease in willing community service volunteers. Meals on Wheels, Chariots, all these things. The vast majority of people who volunteer in these organizations are church members, because that's part of the ethos of a congregation. Not that there won't be, but there will be a lot fewer volunteers in our communities. And a loss of intergenerational connections. Mentors for our youth, especially our young men, are in a crisis. They are. And they need older male companions. But I think that goes for young boys and young girls, need mentors, and our elderly need people who care about them and support and encourage them as well. We're going to lose the whole intergenerational thing. So for better or for worse, this is what I see happening over the next 20 to 30 years. We're almost there. I'm sorry, I know this is a lot. What I think is happening, Leith Anderson wrote a series of books called The Once and Future Church, as he looked ahead into the future. And he said, where we're going is the new apostolic church. And what lies ahead is going to be a whole lot closer to the first 200 to 300 years of Christianity than what has happened since the apostolic church. And what does that kind of look like? Society will be ambivalent to all religious faiths, very tolerant, occasionally hostile, but for the most part, no one's going to care, except for the people practicing the faith. Fewer people who identify as Christian. Church becomes a movement instead of an institution. No one's going to be able to afford the resources for buildings and stuff like this. Instead, it's going to be more like a grassroots movement. Less emphasis on property and buildings and organs. Decentralized decision-making. Denominations are going to go away. It's going to be more congregationalist polity and loose associations. Well, we'll join with this group to create worship resources, but we're doing mission with this group and education with that group. So a lot of decentralized authority. Greater diversity in style, leadership, mission, everything is going to be much more diverse because it's all decentralized. Emphasis on the core teachings of Jesus instead of fringe issues. Now, we all have different ideas about what the fringe issues are, right? But I see that with the decentralization, people are going to get back to, well, what are the core teachings? And I think that's a good thing. More reliance on the Holy Spirit and less on the manual of operations. The reason we have a manual of operations is to prevent us from making the same mistakes we made in the past. That's where that comes from. That's going to go away. More reliance on the Holy Spirit, that's good. More mistakes, that's bad. But that's where we're headed. The manual of operations is generally a good thing. More online spiritual resources accessible to more people. Less culture wars, more compassion. Okay, what should we do? Worship regularly? Forgive those who have hurt you, pray without ceasing, Be a good friend to someone. Examine your own heart. Share the gospel in word and deed. Give generously of yourself in every way possible. Be an advocate for the poor and oppressed. Demand justice and refute lies. And trust God. And that's how we get to the new apostolic church. Okay, we've got about 10 minutes. I apologize. That was a whole lot of data points. I know, it was a data dump. It's going to be available. Mike will have this out shortly. So you can go back and review all that. There's just a lot of information. But it gives you the sense of where we're at, all right? The already amazing religious diversity amongst the general population, right? But also the decline of what I would call the institutional church or the establishment church, and a rise of more decentralized. That's the main thing non-denoms are most of them. But it's not all bad. There is a future. This is not the beginning of the end. All right?
Can you go back about 10 slides to that one
I'm lucky to go forward one slide.
where you show the Gen Z is the most popular and the one before that less and less?
Okay, can you make your point with that?
My comment is that goes by age. So the younger people are attending more, but the older you get, the more busy you're in your career, your kids grow up.
Well, the only thing that's
So it was almost a straight line, and by the time you're old, you're only attending once a week.
But the surprising thing is that not that the older generation only goes once a week. That is expected and has been consistent. The difference is church attendance used to peak in your 60s. All right. By the time you hit 60, people are starting to retire. They've got more time on their hands. They were going to church more often, right? So the fact that you saw it's a straight line. Well, it used to be more a low attendance amongst the young, a rising until about 60, and then now it's just kind of straight instead of that peaking later. We've lost the younger baby boomers and the Gen X and the older Gen X. That group should be our higher.
Should have been going up.
Yes, it should have been going up. Yes, so we lost that bump of the people, let's say in their 50s and 60s, who should be the highest participants, and they're not. Instead, we've got this younger generation coming. And I contend it may be because those people are not that the younger generation is more there. Because the church has traditionally emphasized the role of elders, which were your 50, 60, 70-year-olds. And that's why I said maybe we need to really turn our attention to these 20, 30-year-olds and put more emphasis on, and not just families, but all people, single and married, children, no children, dog lovers and cat haters. Put them all, we need, wait, I didn't get that right, did I?
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, I did. I thought so. Okay. Anyways, we've got about 5 minutes. Any other thoughts or questions on all this? Yeah, Chris?
Your thoughts, Al, on with social media, internet access, I think people have really lost a sense of discernment.
Yeah.
If you're going to read scholarly work, at least it's been vetted by somebody.
Yes.
And you can check the author's credentials. The stuff that's out there that people just look at it. Where did you get that idea?
Yeah.
So,
All right. So when my computer comes up and I go on to and I'm probably going to get this wrong, but my browser, okay, I get a page that is covered with a variety of news, on all sorts of stuff, right? And I don't know why, some algorithm, something, I don't know. It's everything from cooking recipes to politics to sports to aging to all sorts of stuff. I get a lot of Burmese mountain dog videos, and I don't know why. I've never had one. I don't know why. But like in preparing this, I found it fascinating. During this week, suddenly I'm overloaded with church resource. And it's because I've been online and research. But on that page, I bet some of you have a page like that too. I started clicking on some of these to see, well, that's interesting. And it was like, this was an article from 1962. and yet it's popping up on my, as if it was a new thing. The Gen Z, I read this one thing popped up and said, Gen Z attendance at an all-time low. And I thought, well, that's not what I've been reading. And I clicked on it. It was from 2009. So what I want to say is, there's a lot of stuff on the internet that, presents itself as if it's news, but you got to be careful because it's not what it seems to be.
Yeah. Al, what are your thoughts about, from a standpoint of the future being more acceptance of things today, we're more rigid and caustic about? Almost like in the 60s, we got really worried about the rights to vote and diversity, and so now we're going through a period of the hostilities on each side, and we're coming to a point of not being able to appreciate really what I would say the teachings of Jesus are, to love people. What about that as far as the next wave? Once we get through this, which we're going to, this period of just extremism, what's your thoughts about that and how the church plays that?
So the American political system currently wins by division. And that's why we have such extreme views that spill over into our religious life, And what has happened traditionally to bring people together around a common core has been a crisis.
That's right.
And I'm suggesting that within the next 50 years, could be tomorrow, could be 50 years out, we're going to have a major world crisis. It may be a pandemic, it may be a famine, it may be a war, it may be a financial depression. But historically, we have these, and we're due. So what happens when you have a crisis? People band together. One of the reasons we won World War II was that Northerners and Southerners, blacks, whites, and Asians all put aside their historical distrust of each other to fight a war and win, right? And I predict that, so in all honesty, I pray for my grandchildren because I believe my grandchildren are going to be living through some kind of world crisis reorganization. I do believe that's what's going to pull us back together. I wish it was a rosier, like, oh, we could all recognize one great ideal, and no. It's going to be an existential threat to our being that pulls us back together. And what happens in crises? People start going to church again. But somewhere in the next 50 years. Yeah.
So the Sunday after 9/11,
Yeah.
this church was absolutely packed.
Yeah.
You couldn't find a place to sit.
Yeah. And then we figured out we weren't really, no one was at war with us, and within a month, everything was back down. Yeah. Yeah, we had the same phenomena in North Carolina, and probably even more so because we were closer to where the attacks were taking place. I mean, the whole East Coast was on alert for weeks. And so, yeah, same experience when you're under crisis. Yeah, Mike?
Just a personal observation. It's a slide much earlier when you showed that there's a lot of churches with less than 100 people.
Yeah.
And Judy and I experienced that one time during my business career, because we got transferred all over the country, over and over again. And we ended up in New Jersey one time, in a very populated area. But there was no nearby Presbyterian church. I mean, it was a very long drive.
Yeah.
And we just didn't want to go through that and want to attend a lot of things at church when we had to drive that far. It turns out there was a Methodist church about 2 blocks away from our house. And I said, let's just go there one week and see what it's like. We went there and we were shocked when we went in because it was less than 100 people.
Yeah.
And my first reaction was, this is too small. But it was very friendly, very friendly. And we went home, we enjoyed it. We filled out a little card that we were visitors. Monday, there was a knock on the door, and it was the pastor.
Oh my gosh.
First of all, he gave us a great sermon. He said, we really enjoyed this.
Yeah.
And so he said, do you make coffee? I said, yeah. We invited him in, and he talked to us. He wanted to know my background and everything, and what Judy did and everything. And then he said, you'd be great for our church. And And I said, well, we were really impressed and how friendly it was and everything. He said, well, we have a job offer for you. We want you to be our Sunday school superintendent. And he was the only person in church paid for anything.
Yeah.
Everybody else was volunteer.
Everybody was a volunteer. And so,
Yeah.
now we're Sunday school superintendents for 2 years.
There you go. There you go. There are a lot of benefits to small churches. There are. It's not a bad thing. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't want to speak for Chris, but I think he would agree with me. Regardless of all the kidding, it is a joy to be with you on Sunday mornings. And hopefully this is helpful to you and encourages your own spiritual journey.
We can't thank you enough, Alex.
Well, so. All right, let's go to worship.